what was it? Because your brother and you have produced many, many films together.
Yes.
But this is your first time directing.
Yeah.
What made you make that leap, and why this story?
Complete loss of all sanity. I mean, we'd lost
I
most
was
of our
gonna say.
sanity, but then that was the final step that we totally went crazy. No, I had an experience where I live in New York. I came home one night, and a homeless man had broken into my house, my apartment in New York, and he was sort of sitting in my foyer, wrapped against a radiator. And it was 2 in the morning. I was with some close friends, and there he was, you know, and it was cold, and it was February. And it was a particularly cold February, you know, and not that any February is warm in New York, actually, as I think back forever. But so there he was, and he said, "I'm cold, and I'm just looking for a place to get warm, you know. I'm sorry, I didn't take anything. I don't mean you any harm, you know." So I said, "Well, I have to call the police." So they came, and they talked to him, and they said, "What do you want to do with him?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to go to a shelter." And they said, "Okay." And I said, I won't press charges, take him to a shelter." So they put him in the back of the police car, and off they drive. And a couple blocks later, I see the car stop, and out he bounds into the snow, disappears. But in May, he reappeared and sat in front of this building for what seemed like, 7 days and 7 nights. You know, every time I went in or out, there he was. And I tried to talk to him, and he wouldn't talk to me. And I kept calling the police, and they came. And finally, the police sent the community rep to talk to me, and she said, "What is wrong with you? Why do you keep calling us, And I said, "Because he's psychotic. He's covered in urine, and he's delusional. He needs to go to hospital. Take him to hospital." "Well, we're not an ambulance service. This is not our job. This is not a law enforcement problem. This is a problem of our society." And of course, she's right. It isn't a law enforcement problem. And, our city in New York, I mean, despite the progressiveness, or I don't know, maybe the quote progressiveness of our mayor, is inundated with homeless people that are severely mentally ill. And no matter what statistic you read, the vast majority of them are mentally ill. So if you come to homelessness through economic deprivation, 3 days on the streets of New York being homeless, you're clinically depressed. There's no question about that. And I've treated many homeless people in my life as a doctor. And I just, it defies the imagination, really, that we live in this country that is so rich and so powerful, and with so much resources, and frankly has the capacity to be, I think the capacity to be incredibly generous, actually, in many respects. But yet we live among people that are so severely ill, severely mentally ill, and in such dire circumstance. And I know LA and, obviously every major city in the country and all over the place.
In the world, right.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
But in New York, it's such a tight city, and you walk over people to get to the cab or to get to the subway, and you sort of, and every one of those people is another Linda Bishop. And I wanted to get into someone's head that was in that situation, because I wanted people to be angry and feel sad. I want people to be angry and feel sad by watching the film. That was the goal. I remember we sat with an associate producer initially, and we watched one cut of this, and she said, "How is anyone going to be able to take this film?" And I said, "Well, that's the point. This isn't, a romantic comedy. I mean,
right.
This
no,
is
it's not a romantic comedy.
Situation.
I concur.
So I wanted people to be shaken a little, and that was the inspiration for doing it. And then we began to look for the story, and we found Rachel's article, and we thought, okay, let's do this,
Yeah, and I can say that once they came to me, that what I found so compelling was that very fine line between sanity and creativity and homelessness and inspiration, and in New York it really is all around you, because there are so many artists and so many people creating so many tremendous things, and at the same time there's so many people that are so desperate and thrown into such a haphazard life, so seemingly unnecessarily, and yet, just by a thread, they lose their way and find themselves in a very desperate situation. And I think that the situation with Linda Bishop was so compelling because also she had a family that really they were trying to reach her, and it's so tragic that our system didn't allow them access in some way to know what happened to her. And yet at the same time, since I'm sympathetic to Linda, and of course her family, but to Linda, I feel so much, I understand that she wouldn't want the very people that she's running away from to be in charge of what should happen to her in her way of thinking.